I did not fly home. I did not scream. I did not beg. I did something worse. I said, "Okay." And I let my sister believe she had won right up until the moment her flower dream bloomed into a legal disaster so loud the whole town could hear it. My name is Brinley Diaz. I was 300 miles away from home, sitting in a sterile hotel room in Cleveland, when my life fractured into two distinct timelines, before the call and after the call. Later that morning, it was 12:14 in the morning. The air conditioning in the room was humming a low, aggressive drone that made it impossible to sleep. I was still awake, reviewing risk assessment files for Northbridge Risk and Compliance, the corporate job that paid for my mortgage while my soul lived in a small, brick-walled bakery back in our hometown. My phone buzzed against the glass top of the nightstand. It was a violent sound in the quiet room. I looked at the screen. It was Noelle, my night manager at Ryan Marigold. Noelle never called. She texted. She sent emojis of croissants or panic faces when the delivery truck was late. She did not call at 12:14 in the morning unless the building was on fire. I slid the answer button across the screen. "Brinley," Noelle whispered. She was crying. The sound of her breath hitching was louder than her voice. "Brinley, you have to help. There are people here. They are breaking the door." My blood went cold. I sat up, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Call the police. Noelle, lock yourself in the office and call 911 right now." "I can't," she sobbed. "They have keys. They said you gave them keys. They said you allowed this." "Who?" I demanded. "Who is there?" "Turn on your camera." I switched the call to FaceTime. The connection stuttered for a second, pixelating the image, and then it snapped into sharp, horrifying focus. I was looking at the interior of Rye Marigold, my bakery. The place I had built with 4 years of sleepless nights and every cent of my savings. But it did not look like my bakery. The air was thick with red dust. It swirled in the light of the hanging Edison bulbs like a fog of war. Through the haze, I saw the heart of my shop, the antique brick oven. I had spent $15,000 restoring that oven. I had spent weeks scrubbing the soot off its face until the red clay shone like a ruby. It was gone. The face of the oven was smashed in. Bricks were scattered across the black and white tiled floor like broken teeth. The heavy iron door was hanging off one hinge, twisted and useless. Standing in the middle of the wreckage was my sister, Cassidy. She was wearing a floral sundress and holding a sledgehammer. She looked like a deranged summer catalog model. She was not sweating. She was not crying. She was smiling. Behind her, my parents were walking through the debris. My mother was stepping over a pile of shattered cooling racks with the casual indifference of someone touring a potential real estate investment. She pointed to the wall where I displayed the daily specials. "The light is much better here for the hydrangeas," my mother said. Her voice was calm. It was chillingly conversational. "The bread smell was always so heavy. It stuck to my clothes. Flowers will be much cleaner." "It opens up the space," my father agreed. He kicked a piece of the oven door aside. It scraped against the floor with a screech that made me flinch. "Brinley was just playing shopkeeper anyway. It is time for a real business, a family business." I could not breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed by the same hammer Cassidy was holding. "Cassidy," I said. My voice sounded tinny and small coming out of Noelle's phone speaker. Cassidy turned toward the camera. She beamed. Her eyes were bright and vacant, completely detached from the violence of her actions. "Oh, hi, Brinley," she said. She rested the head of the sledgehammer on the counter, right on top of the glass display case. I heard the glass crack. "Don't be mad. We had a family meeting. We decided the bakery had run its course. It was looking a little tired. Honestly." "Tired?" I choked out. "We did $40,000 in sales last month. We are booked for weddings until December." "Paperwork." Cassidy waved a hand dismissively. "That is all you care about. Numbers? I care about vision. I am taking the space for my flowers. Brinley, you were just holding the spot for me. You know how it works. I have the dream, and you have the job. You have Northbridge. You are fine. My eyes darted to the floor near Cassidy's feet. There was something lying in the dust. It was a book, a thick leather-bound book with a broken spine. My grandmother's recipe book. It was torn in half. The pages were scattered in the brick dust. The handwritten note on the sourdough starter page, the ink faded and brown from 50 years of use, was crumpled under Cassidy's heel. That was the moment the scream died in my throat. If I had seen just the oven, I might have yelled. I might have threatened. I might have flown into a rage that would have given them exactly what they wanted, the image of the hysterical, unreasonable sister. But seeing that book murdered on the floor did something else to me. It turned off the heat. It flipped a switch deep inside my brain from emotional to transactional. "Mom," I said. "Dad, you are letting her destroy the load-bearing wall of the oven. The lease explicitly forbids structural changes. We are the guarantors." "Brinley," my father snapped, stepping closer to the camera. His face filled the screen, distorted and angry. "We signed the papers too. This is a family asset, and we are deciding to pivot. You signed the transfer of operating rights to Cassidy tonight. We sent it to your email." "If you don't," my mother added, her voice dropping to that dangerous, guilt-inducing register she had perfected over 3 decades. "We will tell everyone in town that you abandoned us. We will tell them you walked away and left your poor sister to clean up your mess. You know how this town talks. Who will trust a risk manager who abandons her own family?" The blackmail was so clumsy, so naked, that it was almost funny. Almost. I looked at Noelle on the screen. She was trembling, holding the phone with both hands. She was terrified. She was 22 years old, and she was watching a family cannibalize itself in real time. "Noelle," I said softly. "Yes, boss?" she whimpered. "Put the phone down. Get the rest of the night prep team. Get your bags. Get out of there." "But the dough," Noelle stammered. "The morning rush." "Forget the dough," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when I fired a vendor for safety violations. Cold, absolute. "Leave the registers open. Leave the lights on. Just get out. Do not touch anything. Do not clean anything. Go." "Okay," she whispered. I watched as Noelle scrambled backward. The camera angle shifted wildly, catching flashes of the ceiling, the smashed oven, and Cassidy raising the hammer again for another swing at the counter. "Wait," I said. Noelle froze. The camera steadied on Cassidy. My sister paused. The hammer raised above her head like an executioner. She looked at the lens. She looked triumphant. She thought this was victory. She thought destruction was the same thing as creation. "What?" Cassidy taunted. "Are you going to cry?" I held my breath. My thumb hovered over the side buttons of my phone. "No," I said. "I just wanted to see you do it." Cassidy laughed. "Fine, watch this." She tensed her muscles. She prepared to bring the hammer down on the main granite countertop, the slab of stone where I had kneaded 1,000 loaves of bread. I pressed the buttons. Click! The screen flashed white for a fraction of a second. The image was frozen in my camera roll. Cassidy, mid-swing, the destruction behind her. My parents watching with approval. The timestamp at the top of the screen reading 12:21 in the morning. "Okay," I said. "What?" Cassidy asked, lowering the hammer slightly, confused by my lack of resistance. "I said okay," I repeated. "You want it? You just take it." I hung up the phone. The silence in the hotel room rushed back in, heavy and suffocating. I stared at the black screen of my phone. I did not cry. I did not call the police. I did not book a flight home. I opened my laptop. I opened the email my father had sent. I saw the attachment. Transfer _of _operations _agreement _draft _1.pdf. I sat there in the dark, 300 miles away, and I began to read. They wanted a war. They wanted to take the one thing that belonged to me. They thought they had broken me because they had broken my oven. They were wrong. They had just freed me. I pulled up the document, and for the first time that night, I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a risk manager who just realized her opponent had forgotten to read the fine print. There is a specific kind of math that exists only in the Diaz household. It does not follow the laws of physics or the principles of economics. In our house, my stability was always the variable that had to balance out Cassidy's chaos. If Cassidy was negative $1,000, I had to be positive $2,000 just to keep the family at zero. I sat in the dark hotel room, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the dust motes dancing in the recycled air. I was not looking at the contract yet. I was looking at the history of my bank account, scrolling back years, tracing the invisible lines of wire transfers and paid invoices that told the real story of our sisterhood. In my family, I was always the engine. Cassidy was the passenger who complained about the radio station while I changed the tire in the rain. When I was 24 years old, I did not have a social life. I did not have weekends. I had Northbridge Risk and Compliance from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. And then I had the dough. I would drive straight from the corporate glass tower to a rented commercial kitchen space that smelled of bleach and old grease. I would shed my blazer, tie on a stained apron, and work until 2 in the morning perfecting my sourdough starter. I slept in 4-hour bursts. I saved every single penny. I ate instant noodles so I could afford the imported French butter. I did this because I knew that in my family. If you wanted something to be yours, you had to build it so high that no one else could reach it. Or so I thought. Cassidy, on the other hand, had phases. Phases were expensive. Phases required capital. 3 years ago, it was the photography studio. She needed the best camera bodies, the prime lenses that cost $2,000 each, and a loft space downtown with exposed brick walls. My parents applauded her artistic vision. They told neighbors that Cassidy was capturing the soul of the city. 6 months later, when the landlords threatened eviction and the camera gear was gathering dust because Cassidy found editing photos too tedious, the applause stopped. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a bill coming due. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my father sliding a piece of paper toward me. It was the lease break fee, $7,500. "You can make money, Brinley," my mother had said, pouring me a cup of tea as if the beverage could dissolve the unfairness of it all. "You have that corporate salary. You are strong. Your sister is different. She is fragile. If she fails, it breaks her spirit. If you lose money, you just work harder. You are resilient." That was their favorite word, resilient. It sounded like a compliment, but it was actually a sentence. It meant I was durable enough to be used. I paid the fee. I always paid. Then came the artisanal candle business. Cassidy insisted that pouring soy wax into vintage teacups was her true calling. She bought inventory on credit. She rented a booth at the high-end craft market for $400 a weekend, but she forgot to calculate the cost of shipping, the cost of packaging, and the fact that she was allergic to the essential oils she was mixing. That phase ended in an urgent care visit and $4,000 of credit card debt. "She tried so hard," my father had whispered to me in the hospital waiting room. "We cannot let this ruin her credit score. She is young. She needs a fresh start." So I wrote another check. I was the engine. I kept the car moving. I kept the lights on. Rye and Marigold was supposed to be different. This was not a phase. This was my life. I had bought the building, a dilapidated former shoe repair shop, with my own down payment. I had not asked my parents for a single cent. In fact, I had hidden the purchase from them for the first 3 months. I spent my weekends scraping layers of lead paint off the walls. I laid the black and white tiles myself, my knees bruising against the concrete subfloor. I restored that brick oven with a toothbrush and a mixture of vinegar and baking soda until the red clay sang. When I finally opened the doors and the smell of rosemary and burnt sugar filled the street, I thought I had finally drawn a line. I thought I had built a fortress. But tonight, staring at the frozen image of Cassidy holding that sledgehammer, I realized I had made a critical error in my calculations. I thought Rye and Marigold was proof of my independence. I thought it showed them I was a separate entity, to my parents. My success was not a boundary. It was a buffet. They did not see the 18-hour days. They did not see the burns on my forearms or the dark circles under my eyes. They saw a family asset. They saw a building that was doing well, a brand that had equity, and they decided that since I was the strong one, I could afford to share. I could afford to step aside. The bakery is tired, Cassidy had said. It wasn't tired. It was profitable. But profit requires work, and Cassidy did not want the work. She wanted the shell. She wanted the location, the foot traffic, the Instagram tag, the ready-made audience. She wanted to hollow out my life and wear it like a costume, and my parents were handing her the knife. I looked at the transfer agreement on my screen again. They expected me to sign it because I always signed. They expected me to absorb the blow, to rebuild, to be resilient. They were counting on the fact that I loved them enough to let them steal from me. But they had forgotten what I did for a living. I am not just a baker. I am a risk manager. My entire career at Northbridge is built on predicting worst-case scenarios. I assess structural weaknesses. I calculate the probability of betrayal. I closed my eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. The anger was there, boiling in my gut. But it was cooling rapidly into something hard and sharp. I had known this day might come. Not exactly like this. I did not predict the sledgehammer or the midnight demolition, but I knew that eventually. Cassidy would want what I had. I knew that eventually. My parents would ask me to sacrifice my harvest to feed her hunger. So, 6 months ago, I had prepared for it. I did not build Ryan Marigold on blind faith. I built it on a failsafe. I opened a folder on my desktop that I had named Tax Documents 2025 to keep prying eyes away. Inside was a subfolder simply labeled Plan B. I clicked it open. The documents inside were not emotional. They were legal. They were financial. They were the kind of paperwork that acted like a landmine, invisible until you stepped on it. And by then, it was far too late to run. My family thought they were taking a bakery. They thought they were bullying the quiet, reliable daughter into submission. They thought they were simply rearranging the furniture in a house they owned. They had no idea that I had already rigged the foundation. "You want the engine?" I whispered to the empty hotel room. "Fine, you can have the engine, but you forgot to check if I still had the keys to the ignition." I started typing. I was not writing a resignation letter. I was writing the first move of a game they did not even know we were playing. They wanted the operating rights? I would give them the operating rights. I would give them everything they asked for, and in doing so, I would hand them an anchor and tell them it was a trophy. I was done being the savior. It was time to be the risk they failed to assess. I sat in the silence of the hotel room, the air conditioner still humming its monotonous tune. My hands were hovering over the keyboard, trembling slightly, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a surgeon standing over an open chest cavity. The urge to react was visceral. I wanted to call the police in Cleveland and have them patch me through to my hometown precinct. I wanted to post the screenshot of Cassidy with the sledgehammer on every community Facebook page and watch the internet tear her to shreds. I wanted to book the first flight out at 6 a.m. and scream until my throat bled. I did none of those things. Emotion is a luxury I could not afford. Emotion is messy. Emotion gets you a temporary feeling of release and a permanent headache. In my line of work at Northbridge, we do not operate on feelings. We operate on leverage. I took a deep breath, held it for 4 seconds, and exhaled. Then, I opened the digital file labeled Lease Agreement, Main Street. I knew the document by heart, but I needed to see the words on the screen to confirm my strategy. I scrolled to paragraph 12, section B. Tenant shall not make any structural alterations, additions, or improvements to the leased premises without the prior written consent of the landlord. I scrolled down to paragraph 14. The premises shall be used solely for the purpose of a retail bakery and cafe. Any change in the permitted use requires an amendment to this lease. And finally, paragraph 21. Tenant shall not assign this lease or sublet any portion of the premises without landlord's written consent. Cassidy had already violated all three. She had altered the structure by destroying the oven. She was planning to change the use to a flower shop and champagne bar, and she was demanding I transfer operations to her without the landlord's knowledge. She had not just broken a few bricks, she had handed me a loaded gun. Next, I opened the file for my business insurance, then the equipment loans, and finally, the most critical document of all, the trademark registration for Rye and Marigold. The name belonged to me. The logo belonged to me. The goodwill, the reputation, the 5-star reviews. They were all intellectual property registered solely in the name of Brinley Diaz. My parents thought Rye and Marigold was just a sign above a door. They did not understand that it was a separate legal entity, one that they had no claim to. I picked up my phone and dialed Graham Pike. Graham was my personal attorney, a man who cost $400 an hour and was worth every single penny. It was nearly 1 a.m, but Graham answered on the second ring. "Brinley?" His voice was rough with sleep. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said. My voice was calm, almost robotic. "But it will be. I need you to draft a document for me. Graham, I need it in my inbox in 30 minutes. At 1 a.m? Yes, it is an emergency transfer of management authority. I heard the rustle of sheets as he sat up. "You are selling the bakery?" "No," I said. "I am setting a trap. I need a document that looks like a surrender. I need it to look like I'm giving up. Graham, I need it to be full of flowery language about family unity and cooperation, but I need the liability clauses to be ironclad. Brinley, what is going on?" "I need a document they will sign without reading," I said. "Can you do that?" There was a pause. Then, I heard the click of a lamp turning on. "Tell me what you need in it." "I am transferring temporary operational control to my sister, Cassidy Diaz, for the purpose of renovation and rebranding, but I need a clause that states the assignee, that is Cassidy, assumes full financial and legal liability for all renovations, including permit acquisition, structural integrity, and compliance with the master lease." "That is standard," Graham said, his voice sharpening as he fully woke. "But if she doesn't read it—" "She won't," I cut in. "She thinks contracts are boring paperwork. She only scans for the numbers." "What numbers?" "The bait," I said. "I want you to include a provision for an initial operating fund. I'm going to transfer $15,000 from the business savings account into the operating account. The contract will state that this money is released to her control upon signature." "You're paying her to steal your business?" Graham sounded genuinely horrified. "No," I corrected him. "I'm paying her to step into her own trap. $15,000 is just enough for her to buy flowers, hire decorators, and maybe put a deposit down on some overpriced furniture. It's enough to make her feel rich. It's enough to make her sign immediately so she can get to the spending part. And the catch? The catch is that the fund is strictly for authorized business improvements. And since she has no authorization from the landlord to renovate, every penny she spends will be a misappropriation of funds. But more importantly, Graham, I need a guarantor clause." "For your parents?" "Yes. My parents are the ones pushing this. They are the ones claiming this is a family asset. So, I want a clause that says the guarantors, my mother and father, jointly and severally guarantee the performance of the assignee if Cassidy causes damages. They pay. If Cassidy gets sued by the landlord, they pay. If Cassidy violates city codes, they pay." "Brinley," Graham said softly, "if they sign this, and she destroys that building like you say she might, they could lose their house. They could lose their retirement." "I know," I said. "Draft it." I hung up. I spent the next 20 minutes staring at the wall. I thought about the time my father told me that my savings account was selfish when Cassidy needed a new car. I thought about my mother telling me that I should be grateful I had a job that was easy so I could support my sister's complex artistic soul. They wanted to leverage their parental authority to take my business. I was going to use that same authority to anchor them to Cassidy's inevitable failure. It was legal judo. I was not fighting their force. I was using it to pull them off balance. The email pinged at 1:32 in the morning. Subject: Draft Agreement. Review immediately. I opened the PDF. It was a masterpiece of legal deception. The title was friendly: Family Business Transition and Management Agreement. The first page was full of soft words like collaboration, shared vision, and empowerment. It stroked their egos. It made it sound like I was finally accepting my role as the silent financier of Cassidy's brilliance. Then came Clause 4. Operating fund allocation. There it was, $15,000, written out in bold. It shone like a diamond in the text. Cassidy's eyes would lock onto that number and stop reading. She would see the money, and her brain would immediately start spending it. She would not see Clause 6. Clause 6. Assumption of liability and indemnification. The assignee, Cassidy Diaz, acknowledges that all renovations and structural alterations are undertaken at her sole discretion and risk. The assignee agrees to indemnify and hold harmless the owner, Brinley Diaz, from any claims, damages, fines, or legal actions resulting from said renovations. And then, the final nail in the coffin, Clause 9, Guarantor Obligation. The guarantors, Parent 1 and Parent 2, hereby personally guarantee the full performance of the assignee's obligations under this agreement, including but not limited to financial restitution for any breach of the master lease or damage to the premises. It was not just a contract, it was a transfer of a grenade. I read it twice. I checked for typos. I checked the definitions. It was perfect. I saved the file. I did not send it yet. I needed to let them stew for a few more hours. I needed them to think I was agonizing over the decision. I needed them to think I was weak, broken, and defeated. I walked to the window of my hotel room and looked out at the dark city of Cleveland. I imagined my parents standing in the dust of my bakery, feeling like conquerors. I imagined Cassidy dreaming of her champagne bar, oblivious to the fact that she was standing on a trapdoor. I went back to the laptop and composed the email. I kept the body text short, pathetic, and defeated. Subject: You win. I cannot fight you on this. I am tired. I just want peace. Attached is the agreement to transfer management. The money is ready to be released as soon as you sign. I hovered the mouse over the send button. In my family, I was the one who set the table. I cooked the meals. I cleaned the dishes. I made sure everyone was fed. Tonight, I was setting the table one last time, but this meal was going to be very, very expensive. I clicked send. The email disappeared from my outbox with a soft, innocuous swoosh sound. It was 2:14 in the morning. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, syncopated rhythm that felt loud enough to wake the guests in the adjacent rooms. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, my laptop glowing in the darkness, and I waited. I had titled the email, Resolution, in the body. I had written 3 sentences. I am tired of fighting. You win. Please sign the attached transfer agreement so we can move forward. I expected a delay. I expected them to open the document, maybe call a lawyer, or at least read the first page. I expected my father, who prided himself on his business intuition, to ask about the indemnification clause, but I had underestimated their greed, and I had underestimated their arrogance. My phone lit up on the nightstand exactly 30 seconds after I sent the email. It was a notification from the family group chat. Cassidy. Finally. I knew you would stop being dramatic eventually. There was no thank you. There was no, I am sorry I smashed your oven. Just victory. Then, a bubble from my mother appeared. Mom, we are so relieved you decided to be the bigger person. Brinley. Family is the most important asset we have. You made the right choice. I stared at the words, bigger person, in their dictionary. Being the bigger person meant making yourself small enough for them to walk on. Then, the first notification from the electronic signature platform pinged on my laptop. Cassidy Diaz has viewed family_business_transition_agreement, PDF. I watched the clock on the corner of my screen. 2:15 and 10 seconds. The document was 12 pages long. It contained complex legal terminology regarding liability, structural indemnification, and guarantor obligations. To read it properly, even for a layperson, would take at least 15 to 20 minutes. To understand it would take an hour. Ping, Cassidy Diaz has signed family_business_transition_agreement, PDF, 2:15 and 45 seconds. She had read it for 35 seconds. My stomach turned over. It was a mix of nausea and vindication. 35 seconds. She had opened the file, scrolled past the first page where I had stuffed all the meaningless paragraphs about cooperation and sisterly support, and she had stopped exactly where I knew she would. Clause 4. The money. She saw $15,000, and her brain shut down. She did not see a contract. She saw a check. She saw a shopping spree for her flower vases and her champagne flutes. She signed her name to a legal death sentence because she was too busy counting money that was not even hers yet. Ping. Robert Diaz has viewed the document. My father, the man who had lectured me on fiscal responsibility since I was 6 years old. The man who claimed to be the patriarch of our financial security. Ping. Robert Diaz has signed. 1 minute flat. He had moved faster than Cassidy. Ping. Martha Diaz has signed. It was done. In less than 3 minutes. All three of them had signed a document that transferred not just the operation of the bakery, but the entire weight of its destruction onto their own shoulders. I downloaded the audit trail immediately. This was the most crucial piece of evidence I possessed. The audit trail showed the IP addresses, the timestamps, and the duration of viewing. It proved that they were not coerced. It proved they were eager. When they later tried to claim in court that I had tricked them or pressured them, this piece of paper would show a judge that they had raced each other to sign. I let out a breath that shuddered through my entire body. They were trapped. They just did not know it yet. But I did not have time to celebrate. I had one more move to make before the sun came up. I logged out of the signature platform and logged into the Rye and Marigold business banking portal. The interface loaded, showing the healthy balance I had built up over 4 years of grinding work. There was the operating account, the tax savings, and the payroll account. Cassidy thought she had the keys to the kingdom. She thought that by signing that paper, she now owned everything inside those accounts. She probably thought she could wake up tomorrow and start paying her creative consultants out of my hard-earned revenue. I clicked on the payroll account. This money was not for me. This was for Noelle. This was for Marcus, my head baker who had 3 kids. This was for Sarah, the dishwasher who was saving for nursing school. They were the ones who actually made the bakery run. Not my family. I initiated a wire transfer. I moved every cent of the payroll funds, plus a 3-month severance buffer I had quietly accumulated, into a new, separate holding account I had opened under a different LLC name months ago. It was the Plan B account. The screen asked for confirmation. Are you sure you want to transfer $42,000? I clicked yes. The balance in the main payroll account dropped to 0. Then, I did the same for the tax savings. I moved it to a secure escrow account where I could pay the IRS directly, ensuring Cassidy could not embezzle the government's money. Finally, I transferred exactly $15,000 into the main operating account, the bait money I had promised in the contract. When Cassidy logged in tomorrow, she would see the $15,000. She would feel rich. She would not notice that the payroll buffer was gone. She would not notice that the tax reserve was empty. She would just see the number she wanted to see. I picked up my phone and opened the group chat I had with my staff. It was 2:30 in the morning, but I knew Noelle was still awake. Brinley. The ownership of the physical location is in dispute. Do not go into the shop tomorrow. I have secured your wages. No one is losing their paycheck. No one is being left behind. Only the bricks were stolen. The team stays with me. 3 dots appeared instantly. Noelle. We are with you, boss. We saw what she did. We aren't working for her. Marcus. I took my starter home with me yesterday. She didn't get the mother dough. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in hours. Marcus had saved the soul of the bakery. Cassidy had smashed the oven, but she had missed the culture. I closed the laptop. The room felt different now. The air was still cold, but the panic was gone. It had been replaced by the icy clarity of a general looking at a map. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Graham, my lawyer. He must have seen the notifications come through. Graham. They signed? Brinley. All of them, under 3 minutes total. Graham. Good God. They didn't even read the indemnity clause. Brinley. No. They saw the 15,000 and went blind. I walked to the window and looked down at the empty streets of Cleveland. Somewhere, 300 miles away, my sister and parents were probably opening a bottle of wine. They were probably toasting to their cleverness. They were probably laughing about how easy it was to push me over. I typed a reply to Graham, my fingers moving slow and deliberate. Brinley. They think they just won a bakery. Graham. They don't realize that they just signed a mortgage on a disaster. I set the phone down. Now, I just had to wait. I had to wait for the flowers to bloom, and I had to wait for the rot to set in. The digital transformation happened exactly 6 hours after the physical destruction. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. The account previously known as Rye and Marigold Official, the account I had grown from 0 to 12,000 followers by posting close-ups of fermentation bubbles and sourdough crusts, had changed its handle. It was now Cassidy and Bloom. I watched the screen as my sister uploaded her first story. The filter she used was soft and hazy, turning the red brick dust into a romantic, vintage sepia fog. She held the camera high, angling it down to make her face look slender and her eyes wide. "Hey guys," she chirped. She was wearing a white hard hat that still had the price tag on it. "So, big news. We are finally liberating this space. We are freeing it from all that heavy flour and the smoke. It is time for something fresh. Something that breathes." She panned the camera around. In the background, I saw 3 men in dirty t-shirts ripping the stainless steel prep tables out of the floor. They were not using drills to unscrew the bolts. They were using crowbars to wrench them out of the concrete. "Say goodbye to the dungeon," Cassidy laughed, "and say hello to the light." I sat in my hotel room, 300 miles away, and I pressed the record button on my screen capture software. This was the hardest part of the plan. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to type. I wanted to scream in the comments. I wanted to tell her that the dungeon she was mocking was a health code-compliant commercial kitchen that had passed every inspection with a perfect score. But I did not type a single letter. If I commented, I was involved. If I offered advice, I was liable. If I told her to stop, I was acknowledging that I still had a stake in the outcome. So I watched. I watched as she hired a demolition crew that clearly did not have a license. I knew they were unlicensed because they were wearing sneakers, not steel-toed boots, and they were smoking cigarettes inside the building while ripping down drywall. "We are opening up the flow," Cassidy narrated in the next clip. "The energy in here was so blocked, we need circulation." One of the men in the background grabbed a pipe wrench and started reefing on the main gas line that fed the deck ovens. My breath hitched. He had not turned off the main valve at the street. I could tell by the position of the yellow handle near the floor. If he cracked that pipe, he would fill the room with gas in 30 seconds. A single spark from the crowbar would turn my bakery into a crater. I gripped my phone until my hand cramped. "Don't do it," I begged silently. "Don't be that stupid." The man grunted and yanked harder. The pipe shuddered, but it did not break. He stopped, wiped his forehead, and seemingly decided to move to a different pipe. The water line. I exhaled. They were incompetent, but they were lucky. For now, I saved the video, I logged the timestamp, I labeled the file, safety violation, gas line mishandling. Then I scrolled to the comments. My mother was there, of course. She had commented on the video of the destroyed prep tables with 3 heart emojis. "So proud of our visionary daughter," my mother wrote. "Finally, someone with taste is taking charge. This place needed a woman's touch, not just a worker's hand." My father replied to a customer who asked where the sourdough bread was going. "The bread had its moment," he wrote, but we are pivoting to high-end experiences. We are the founders of this location, and we know what the market needs. Founders. They had never mixed a bowl of dough in their lives. They had never woken up at 3 a.m. to fix a broken proofer. But now that the hard work was done, they were rewriting history. They were erasing me. I took a screenshot of the comment. It was proof that they were presenting themselves as the active owners. It was proof that they were endorsing the destruction. Then came the announcement that sealed their fate. Cassidy posted a graphic. It was pink and gold, likely designed on a free app in 5 minutes. Coming soon. The text read, Cassidy and Bloom, a luxury floral studio and champagne bar. Sip bubbles while you build your bouquet. The ultimate girls' night out. I stared at the words, champagne bar. I opened the folder on my laptop labeled City Zoning Codes. My building was zoned for retail bakery and light food service. It was absolutely not zoned for alcohol consumption. To serve champagne, you needed a liquor license, which cost $12,000 and took 6 months to acquire in our county. You also needed 3 separate bathrooms and a dedicated fire exit that was 5 feet wide. My shop had 2 bathrooms and a 3-foot door. Cassidy was advertising a crime. She was soliciting customers for a business that was illegal before she even poured the first glass. I saved the graphic. I saved the caption where she promised bottomless mimosas every Sunday. I was building a mountain of evidence, brick by digital brick. But then, the tone of her stories changed. She walked over to the back wall, the wall that separated the kitchen from the small office where I used to do my accounting. This wall, Cassidy said, tapping the plaster with a manicured fingernail. It is just in the way. It makes the room feel small. We want an open concept. We want grand. She turned to one of the men. Take it down. Are you sure, lady? The man asked. His voice was muffled, but audible on the video. That looks structural. There is a beam up there. I am the owner, Cassidy snapped, flipping her hair. I decide what is structural. I say it goes. The man shrugged and swung his sledgehammer. The plaster cracked. The wood groaned. I hit save on the video. That was it. That was the confession. I am the owner. I decide. She had just absolved me of all liability on camera. When the roof sagged, and it would sag, she could not say I failed to warn her. She had explicitly overridden a contractor's concern. I was about to close the laptop, feeling a sick sense of satisfaction, when a new notification popped up. It was a tag. Cassidy had tagged a local event planning company. Elite Soirees. I clicked on the tag. I saw a post on the event planner's page. We are so excited to partner with the iconic Rye and Marigold brand for their massive relaunch, the caption read. Join us for the Bloom and Bread Gala next Saturday, sponsored by Chimera Vodka. Tickets are $200. My blood ran cold. She was not just taking the building, she was using the name. She was using Rye and Marigold. I had trademarked that name. I had built that reputation. And now she was using my credit, my brand equity, to secure a sponsorship with a vodka company for an event that would be held in a construction site with no liquor license. If that event went wrong, if someone got hurt, or if the police raided it for serving illegal alcohol, the name Rye and Marigold would be destroyed. The lawsuit would not just be against Cassidy, it would be against the brand. I realized then that my plan to sit back and wait had a flaw. I thought they just wanted the real estate. I thought they wanted the physical assets. I was wrong. Cassidy wanted to become me. She wanted to wear my success like a skin suit. She wanted the town to believe that she was the genius behind the bread, and I was just the ghost that had haunted the kitchen. I picked up my phone. I did not call Cassidy. I called the only person who could stop a trademark infringement at 2 a.m. without making a scene. I called the legal department of the hosting platform that managed my website and my domain. I need to report a hijacking, I said to the automated voice system. Cassidy wanted to play business owner? Fine. She was about to learn that the hardest part of business isn't knocking down walls. It is owning the paper they are built on. I looked at the screen one last time. Cassidy was laughing, holding a glass of cheap wine in the middle of the dust, raising a toast to new beginnings. Cheers. Cassidy, I whispered. You just toasted with poison. The morning sun in Cleveland was gray and flat, filtering through the hotel sheers with the enthusiasm of a wet towel. I sat at the small desk, my laptop open, my phone placed precisely parallel to the edge of the table. The emotional part of my brain had been packed away in a box and shoved into a dark corner. What remained was the auditor, the risk assessor, the executioner. I picked up the phone and dialed Graham. It is time, I said. Are you sure you do not want to warn them? Graham asked. He sounded tired. He had been reviewing the file since 4 a.m. Warning them implies they made a mistake, I replied, staring at a stain on the carpet. They did not make a mistake. They made a choice. Make the call to the landlord. I did not call the landlord myself. That would have been personal. That would have looked like a family squabble. I needed this to be clinical. I needed it to be about contract law. I listened on mute as Graham dialed the number for Mr. Henderson, the owner of the building that housed Ryan Marigold. Mr. Henderson, Graham said, his voice smooth and professional. This is Graham Pike, representing Ms. Brinley Diaz. We are just conducting a routine compliance review of the lease terms regarding the current renovations. We wanted to confirm that the change of use addendum had been processed and signed on your end. There was a silence on the line so profound, I could almost hear the blood draining from Mr. Henderson's face. What renovations? Mr. Henderson asked. His voice was tight. What change of use? Oh, Graham said, injecting a perfect amount of professional confusion into his tone. The transition from a retail bakery to a floral studio and champagne bar, the removal of the ventilation hood and the gas line modifications. My client assumed, given the scale of the work being documented on social media, that the proper approvals were in place. Floral studio? Mr. Henderson sputtered. Champagne? I did not approve any of this. The lease is for a bakery, specifically a bakery. Who is touching the gas lines? I believe the current operators are handling that, Graham said. We will circle back. Thank you. Graham hung up. He is panicking, Graham said to me. Good, I said. He should be. Now he has to act to protect his property insurance. If the building burns down because of unauthorized work, his policy is void. He will be at the site within the hour. What is your next move? The city, I said. I hung up and dialed the anonymous tip line for the Department of Building and Safety. I did not use my name. I did not say I was the sister. I spoke like a concerned neighbor. I would like to report an active construction site at 402 Main Street, I told the operator. I observed workers removing a commercial hood system and modifying gas piping without a permit. There are residential tenants living on the second floor. I am concerned about a potential gas leak or structural failure. We will send an inspector immediately, the operator said. Safety of tenants is a priority 1 response. I hung up. That was the difference between Cassidy and me. Cassidy thought power was shouting at a contractor to knock down a wall. I knew that real power was a quiet phone call to a clerk who had the legal authority to condemn the entire building. Next, I opened the state database for liquor licenses. I searched for Cassidy and Bloom. 0 results. I searched for the address. 0 results. To operate a champagne bar in our county. You needed a Type 47 liquor license. The application fee was $600. The background check took 3 months. The public hearing requirement took another month. And you needed 3 bathrooms compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. My bakery had 2 small bathrooms. Neither was wheelchair accessible. Cassidy was selling tickets to an event where she promised alcohol she could not legally buy. In a building she could not legally serve it in. Using a name she did not legally own. I compiled the screenshots of her champagne bar announcements into a PDF. I added the floor plan of the bakery showing only 2 bathrooms. I labeled the file Zoning and Licensing Violations. Then I checked my email. A video file had just arrived from Noel. I opened it. The video was shaky, filmed secretly from waist height. It showed the ceiling near the back office, exactly where Cassidy had ordered the structural wall to be removed yesterday. There was a crack, It was not a hairline fracture. It was a jagged, ugly line running from the crown molding toward the center of the room, looking like a lightning bolt frozen in plaster. Noelle's voice whispered on the recording. I told her. Brinley. I showed her the dust falling. She said it was just the building settling. She said old plaster always cracks when you vibrate the floor. I watched the video 3 times. I paused it on the crack. I zoomed in. That was not settling. That was the second-floor joist sagging because the load-bearing support was gone. The anger flared again, hot and sharp. But I pushed it down. This was evidence. This was the smoking gun that proved negligence. Cassidy was not just stealing my business. She was endangering the lives of the people upstairs. I forwarded the video to Graham. Add this to the liability folder, I typed. If the ceiling comes down, this video proves she was warned. I closed the laptop and stood up. It was time to go back. I opened the travel app on my phone. I booked a one-way ticket to my hometown, but I did not type in my parents' address for the destination. I did not type in the address of my own apartment, which was only 10 blocks from the bakery, because Cassidy had a key to my place for emergencies. I booked a room at the Business District Hotel, the one used by out-of-town consultants and lawyers. It was expensive, sterile, and completely neutral ground. I was returning to my hometown, but I was not coming home. I was arriving as a hostile witness. I packed my bag with mechanical efficiency, laptop, charger, hard drive containing the backup of the bakery's financial records, the black suit I wore for board meetings. As I was zipping the suitcase, my phone buzzed with an alert from a credit monitoring service. I had set it up years ago for my parents, back when I was helping them refinance their car. I had never turned off the notifications because they were terrible with passwords and often locked themselves out. Alert. New lien recorded. I frowned. A lien? I tapped the notification. It opened the county recorder's public access site. Document type: Home Equity Line of Credit. Borrower: Robert and Martha Diaz. Lender: Second Horizon Financial Services. Amount: $75,000. Date recorded: yesterday. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The breath knocked out of me. $75,000. They had not just signed the transfer agreement. They had leveraged their house. They had taken out a high-interest loan against their own equity to fund Cassidy's dream. The $15,000 I gave them in the operating fund was just the bait. This $75,000 was the meal. They were pouring nearly $100,000 into a hole in the ground, and they had done it behind my back. They had mortgaged their safety net, the house they planned to retire in, because they believed in Cassidy's vision more than they respected my reality. This changed the calculus. Originally, I thought the worst that would happen was Cassidy would lose the lease and get sued for damages. I thought my parents would lose their pride and maybe some savings. But this was total annihilation. If the landlord sued for the structural damage, which he would, and if the city fined them for the illegal demolition, which they would, and if the event sponsors sued for fraud, which they would, my parents would not just be broke, they would be homeless. The bank would foreclose on the house to cover the lien. I stared at the screen. I could call them. I could warn them right now. I could tell them to stop spending, to return the money to the bank before it was gone. I looked at the screenshot of Cassidy holding the sledgehammer. I looked at the text from my mother calling me selfish for wanting to keep my own business. I remembered the sound of my grandmother's recipe book tearing. They had signed the guarantee. They had signed the document that made them liable for Cassidy's actions. And then they had gone to a predatory lender and signed away their future to double down on the bet. I stood up and grabbed my suitcase handle. I could not save people who were determined to drown. If I dove in now, they would just pull me under with them. Graham, I said into the phone as I walked out of the hotel room, prepare the full dossier, the contract, the liability clauses, the video of the crack, the trademark registration, and print out the county record of their new mortgage. You found the mortgage? Graham asked quietly. Yes. Does it change anything? No, I said, walking toward the elevator. It just means the blast radius is going to be larger than I thought. I pressed the button for the lobby. Get the paperwork ready. Graham, I am coming to close the account." The morning of the grand opening arrived with a brightness that felt artificial, like the lighting in a dentist's office. Main Street was buzzing. From where I sat, parked 2 blocks away in a rented sedan with tinted windows, I could see the spectacle my sister had created. It was less of a business launch and more of a coronation. The sidewalk in front of 402 Main Street was drowning in pastel balloons. An archway of imported roses, thousands of dollars worth of petals that would be dead by tomorrow, framed the entrance where my bakery door used to be. The smell of fresh bread, once the heartbeat of this block, had been replaced by an overpowering cloud of expensive perfume and cut stems. Influencers were already swarming. I recognized a few local fashion bloggers, women who had never bought a single loaf of sourdough but were now posing with champagne flutes, duck-facing into their ring lights, and there was Cassidy. She stood in the center of the chaos, wearing a white silk jumpsuit that probably cost more than my monthly ingredient budget. She looked radiant. She looked triumphant. She was holding a microphone, addressing a small crowd of well-wishers and curious neighbors. I pulled up the live stream on my phone, the audio syncing with the visual reality across the street. "It was a hard decision," Cassidy was saying, her voice thick with practiced emotion. "My sister, she just could not handle the pressure anymore. The bakery was drowning her. So, as a family, we stepped in. We saved this space. We turned a place of stress into a sanctuary of beauty." My mother was nodding vigorously in the background, clutching my father's arm. I watched as she leaned over to Mrs. Gable, the town librarian, and said loud enough for the microphone to catch, "Brinley is taking a mental health break. We are so relieved she let us take this burden off her shoulders." A burden. They called the business that paid their mortgage, fixed their cars, and bailed them out of debt a burden. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. I was watching a car crash in slow motion, but I was the one who had cut the brake lines. My eyes scanned the video feed, ignoring the lies and focusing on the structure. The lens of the camera panned up to capture the airy new ceiling. There it was. A fine, almost invisible mist of white dust was drifting down from the corner where the load-bearing wall used to be. It was settling on the petals of the hydrangeas. It was dusting the rims of the champagne glasses. To the guests, it probably looked like magic or a trick of the light. To me, it looked like structural failure. And the ventilation system, I zoomed in on my screen. The gaping hole where the commercial hood had been ripped out was not patched. It was simply covered by a massive, trailing installation of wisteria vines. They had hidden a fire hazard with flammable decor. "And now," Cassidy announced, raising her glass, "to the future of the Diaz legacy." "To the legacy," my father boomed, looking more proud than I had ever seen him. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 10:14 in the morning, right on schedule. A white Ford Explorer with the city seal on the door pulled up to the curb, double parking directly behind the food truck Cassidy had hired without a permit. There were no sirens. There were no flashing lights. Bureaucracy does not need to scream to be lethal. A man stepped out. He was wearing a high-visibility vest over a button-down shirt and holding a thick clipboard. I recognized him. It was Inspector Miller. He was not the kind of man who cared about balloon arches or influencers. He was the kind of man who measured door frames to the millimeter and shut down restaurants for having the wrong temperature water in the hand-washing sink. Cassidy did not see him at first. She was too busy laughing at something a blogger said. My father saw him, though. His smile faltered slightly, but he regained his composure, probably assuming it was a guest who had dressed poorly. Inspector Miller walked straight through the crowd. He did not say, "Excuse me." He walked with the heavy, unhurried gait of someone who owns the sidewalk. He stopped at the entrance, right under the rose arch. Cassidy turned, her smile dazzlingly bright. "Welcome. Grab a glass of bubbles and—" Miller did not take a glass. He did not smile back. He lifted his clipboard and pointed a pen at the ceiling, then at the wisteria covering the vent. "Who is the site manager?" Miller asked. His voice was flat, cutting through the ambient jazz music like a knife. I am the owner, Cassidy said, striking a pose. Is there a problem? You are the owner? Miller repeated, checking a box on his form. Good. That simplifies the citation. He stepped past her, marching directly into the shop. Cassidy's face dropped. She looked confused, then annoyed. She chased after him, her heels clicking on the floor. Excuse me, you cannot just walk in here. This is a private event. This is an active construction site operating without a certificate of occupancy, Miller said, his voice loud enough to be picked up by the live stream. And I see an illegal alcohol service set up. The influencers stopped posing. Phones were lowered, then slowly raised again, this time recording the drama instead of the decor. I watched my parents rush forward. Now see here, my father started, using his authoritative voice. We are prominent members of this community. We have permits. You have a permit for a bakery, Miller said, not even looking up from his writing. You do not have a permit for demolition. You do not have a permit for assembly. And you definitely do not have a structural sign-off for removing that wall. The air in the shop changed instantly. The smell of expensive perfume was suddenly cut with the scent of fear. But that was not the end of it. I looked back at the street. A black sedan had pulled up behind the city inspector's vehicle. The passenger door opened. It was Mr. Henderson, the landlord. He looked pale. He looked furious. And he was not alone. Walking beside him was a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a red legal folder. My heart gave a single, hard thump. That was the twist even I hadn't fully anticipated in its timing. That was not just a lawyer. That was the bank representative for the property management firm. Mr. Henderson stormed through the balloons, kicking a stray flower arrangement out of his way. Cassidy! He roared. Cassidy spun around, looking from the inspector to the landlord. Panic was starting to crack her foundation. Mr. Henderson, you made it. Have some champagne. Champagne? Henderson spit the word out. You are serving alcohol? In my building? Without a rider on the insurance? It is just a celebration, my mother interjected, her voice trembling. We are improving the property value. You are destroying my equity, Henderson yelled. He pointed at the woman in the gray suit. You know who this is? This is the bank. They just notified me that my mortgage is in default because the insurance policy was voided the minute you touched that gas line. The woman in the gray suit stepped forward. She did not yell. She simply held up a document. The header was visible even from the distance of the live stream camera. Notice of default and immediate cure. We are shutting this down, the woman said. Effective immediately. Everyone needs to vacate the premises. This building is now considered a liability risk. Cassidy stood in the center of her dream. Surrounded by half-drunk champagne and dying flowers, she looked small. She looked terrified. But the launch, she whispered. The sponsors. The sponsors? Inspector Miller asked, looking up from his clipboard. You mean the ones paying for an event in a condemned building? He pulled a roll of yellow tape from his belt. Caution. Do not enter. I watched as he slapped the first strip of tape across the beautiful, expensive rose arch. The live stream cut to black. Cassidy had finally dropped the phone. I sat in my car, the silence absolute and heavy. I did not smile. I did not feel joy. I just felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a math problem finally solving itself. I put the car in gear. It was time to drive to the lawyer's office. The show was over. The deposition was about to begin. The jazz playlist cut out abruptly, leaving a silence so sudden and thick, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The only sound remaining was the hiss of the espresso machine cooling down, a machine Cassidy did not know how to operate, and the scratching of Inspector Miller's pen against his clipboard. The influencers, sensing a shift in the content algorithm from lifestyle envy to public disaster, had lowered their phones, though I noticed a few red recording lights still blinking from handbags and pockets. Inspector Miller did not look up. He pointed his pen toward the ceiling, then toward the wall where the gas line had been capped, with what looked like duct tape and hope. This is a red tag event, Miller said, his voice flat and bored. I am issuing a stop work order immediately. The gas line modification is illegal. The ventilation removal is a code violation, and the structural integrity of the rear load-bearing wall is compromised. Everyone out, now. Cassidy stood frozen in her silk jumpsuit, her face pale beneath the layers of contouring makeup. The reality of the situation was crashing down on her. But instead of accepting it, she did what she had always done since we were children. She looked for a scapegoat. Wait, Cassidy stammered, her voice pitching up into a frantic squeak. You cannot find me. I am not the owner. My parents, who moments ago had been boasting about their vision, suddenly shrank back. That is right, my father said, stepping away from the inspector. We are just helping. This is Brinley's bakery, Brinley Diaz. She is the one on the deed. She is the one who let the building get to this state. It is her fault, Cassidy screamed, pointing a manicured finger at the empty doorway where she thought I should be. She abandoned the business. She left us with this mess. I was just trying to fix what she broke. If the gas line is wrong, it is because she didn't maintain it. It was a lie so bold, so reflexively cruel, that it almost commanded respect. Almost. That was when the front door chimed. It was not me. I was standing quietly in the back, near the service entrance where I had slipped in unnoticed with the landlord's key. It was Graham Pike. Graham walked into the room with the calm, terrifying energy of a surgeon entering a morgue. He was wearing a navy suit that cost more than Cassidy's entire renovation budget. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a tablet in the other. Good morning, Graham said. His voice was pleasant, but it carried to the back of the room. I represent Ms. Brinley Diaz. Oh, thank God, my mother cried out, rushing toward him. Graham, you have to tell this man. Tell him Brinley is responsible. Tell him we are just the victims here. Graham did not look at my mother. He walked past her to the high-top table where Inspector Miller was writing the citation. He placed his briefcase on the table and clicked the latches open. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. Actually, Graham said, sliding a thick document across the table toward the inspector, my client is not responsible for any of this. I have here a copy of the Family Business Transition and Management Agreement, signed and dated 48 hours ago. Inspector Miller looked up, raising an eyebrow. Section 6, Paragraph 2, Graham recited from memory, not even looking at the paper. The assignee, that is Ms. Cassidy Diaz, assumes full legal and financial liability for all renovations, structural changes, and code compliance. The assignee explicitly indemnifies the original owner against any claims arising from said works. Cassidy's mouth opened, but no sound came out. And, Graham continued, flipping to the last page, here are the electronic signatures, time-stamped. Authenticated, Cassidy Diaz, Robert Diaz, Martha Diaz, all guarantors. That is a piece of paper, my father shouted, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. We signed that under duress. We didn't know what she was doing. We just wanted to help. Graham smiled. It was a razor-thin smile. I anticipated you might say that. He lifted his tablet. He tapped the screen and turned it around so the inspector, the landlord, and the remaining guests could see. It was the video I had recorded from Cassidy's own Instagram story. On the screen, Cassidy was laughing. She was holding a glass of wine in one hand and pointing at the load-bearing wall with the other. The audio was crisp and clear. I am the owner, the digital Cassidy declared. I decide what is structural. I say it goes. Graham paused the video. He zoomed in on the timestamp at the bottom of the screen. Wednesday, 2:14 in the afternoon, Graham said. This was filmed 12 hours after she signed the contract assuming liability. She is not a victim. Mr. Diaz, she is the general contractor. Inspector Miller looked at the tablet, then at Cassidy. He let out a short, dry snort. Well, that is a confession if I have ever heard one. I am writing the citation to Cassidy Diaz and the guarantors, the representative from the bank. The woman in the gray suit who had arrived with the landlord stepped forward. She looked at my parents with eyes like flint. Mr. and Mrs. Diaz, she said, since you are the guarantors of this unauthorized construction, and since you have just admitted to being involved in the management of the property, the bank is invoking the hazardous activity clause of your home equity line of credit. What? My mother whispered. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. You borrowed $75,000 against your primary residence to fund this, the woman said. That capital was used to perform illegal acts that devalued a commercial property. We are freezing the remaining funds and demanding immediate repayment of the spent portion. If you cannot pay, we will move to foreclose. The room spun. I could see it in their eyes. The math was finally hitting them. They were not just losing a bakery, they were losing their house. Cassidy burst into tears. It was a theatrical, sobbing breakdown, the kind she used to get out of speeding tickets. She set me up, Cassidy wailed, looking around for sympathy that was not there. Brinley set me up. She knew this would happen. She tricked me into signing that paper. It is a trap. Graham looked at her. He did not offer a tissue. He did not offer comfort. A trap? Graham asked softly. Ms. Diaz, did you or did you not receive a wire transfer of $15,000 into the operating account at 2 a.m. on Tuesday? Cassidy sniffled, wiping mascara from her cheek. Yes, but— And is it true, Graham interrupted, that by noon on Tuesday you had already spent $12,000 of that money on furniture, flowers, and a deposit for this event? I had to buy things, Cassidy stammered. If you thought it was a trap, Graham said, his voice hard as stone. Why did you spend the bait so quickly? He leaned in closer. You did not think it was a trap, Cassidy. You thought it was a gift. You thought you had won, and you spent the money because you believed you were untouchable. Graham straightened up and closed his briefcase. You were wrong, he said. I stepped out from the shadows then. I did not say a word. I just walked to the counter, picked up the framed photo of the three of them, Mom, Dad, and Cassidy, that they had placed on the display case to look like a happy family business. I looked at it for a second. Then I laid it face down on the glass. The sound of the frame hitting the counter was the final period at the end of their sentence. The internet does not care about building codes. It does not care about load-bearing walls or gas line safety regulations. It only cares about the narrative. And by noon on Tuesday, my sister had spun a story so compelling that even I almost believed I was the villain. I sat in the conference room of Graham Pike's law firm, watching the notifications scroll down my phone screen like a waterfall of digital venom. Brinley Diaz is a narcissist, one comment read. It had 400 likes. Imagine being so jealous of your own sister's creativity that you call the city to shut her down, another said. Cassidy had posted a video. Of course she had. She was sitting in her car, the lighting perfectly angled to catch the single, brave tear rolling down her cheek. She spoke in a soft, trembling voice about sisterhood and betrayal. She did not mention the cracked ceiling. She did not mention the illegal champagne. She only said that I had weaponized the bureaucracy because I could not stand to see her shine. She was calling for a boycott. She was asking the entire town of Cleveland to stand with Cassidy and Bloom against the tyranny of my corporate jealousy. It is working, Graham said, sliding a piece of paper across the mahogany table. We just received this email from the legal team at Chimera Vodka. I picked up the paper. It was a termination of sponsorship. Due to the recent controversy surrounding the Rye and Marigold brand and the associated negative publicity, Chimera Vodka is exercising its right to withdraw from the Bloom and Bread event effective immediately. We do not wish to be associated with family disputes or legal irregularities. They were dropping out. That was $5,000 of sponsorship money gone. But more importantly, they were citing Rye and Marigold as a toxic asset. Cassidy was not just ruining her own reputation. She was dragging my trademark through the mud. And there is more, Graham said. He looked hesitant, which was rare for a man who billed $400 an hour. Your parents have filed a motion. A motion? I asked. For what? Bankruptcy? No, Graham said. For an emergency injunction. They are asking the court to restrain you from interfering with ongoing business operations. They claim your call to the inspector was an act of harassment designed to inflict emotional distress and financial harm. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. They destroy my oven, breach the lease, and violate city code, and they are suing me for harassment because I reported it? They are desperate. Brinley, Graham said, leaning forward. They are backed into a corner. The bank freezes their credit line. The landlord is threatening eviction. They need a villain. If they can convince a judge that this is all your fault, they think they can force you to pay for the damages. They want to drag you back in to fix it. I looked out the window at the gray city skyline. I knew this tactic. It was the same one they used when I was 16 and Cassidy crashed the family minivan. They blamed me for letting her drive. Even though I was at work, they wanted me to be the fixer. They wanted me to swoop in, pay the fines, apologize to the landlord, and make the bad feelings go away so they could go back to pretending everything was fine. They wanted me to settle. Draft the response, I said, turning back to Graham. But not a settlement. I want a scorched earth defense. Brinley, Graham warned. This will get ugly. It is already ugly. Graham, now I want it to be final. Send the cease and desist order regarding the trademark. Tell them that if they use the name Rye and Marigold on one more social media post, on one more flyer, or even speak it in a public forum, I will sue them for trademark dilution and damages of $50,000 per instance. And the lease? Let the landlord evict them, I said. I am not fighting for the building anymore. I am fighting for the name. I stood up. I have a meeting with my staff. I need to make sure they know where their loyalty should lie. I met Noelle and Marcus at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the bakery. They looked terrified. Noelle was wringing her hands, and Marcus, usually a giant of a man, looked small in his chair. We saw the video, Noelle whispered as I sat down. Everyone hates us. Brinley, they are saying we worked for a monster, and now the shop is closed. The police tape is on the door. Are we unemployed? Marcus looked down at his coffee. I have rent due in 6 days, boss. If the bakery is gone, I have to go back to working construction. I looked at them. These were the people who had helped me build everything. They had woken up at 4 a.m. for 3 years. They deserved the truth. The bakery is not gone, I said firmly. Noelle looked up, confused. But the oven, the walls, the landlord is kicking us out. The building is gone, I corrected. 402 Main Street is gone. My sister and my parents killed that location, but they made a very expensive mistake. I pulled a folder from my bag. It was not the legal folder. It was the business strategy folder I had been building for 2 years, the one I had never shown my parents because I knew they would try to claim credit for it. They think Rye and Marigold is a storefront, I said. They think the business is the people walking in off the street to buy a $5 croissant. They think the value is in the brick and mortar. I opened the folder. Inside were contracts. Thick, signed contracts with logos that Noelle and Marcus recognized immediately. 2 months ago, I said, pointing to the first document, I signed a distribution deal with the Fairmont Hotel chain. We are the exclusive provider of artisan sourdough for their 3 locations in the tri-state area. I pointed to the second document. And this is a contract with Whole Foods Regional Purchasing. They want our rosemary sea salt crackers in 40 stores starting next month. Noelle's eyes went wide. 40 stores? The storefront on Main Street? I continued, my voice gaining strength. That was just the showroom. That was the marketing expense. It broke even, but it never made the real money. The real money is in wholesale. The real money is in the commercial contracts that I secured quietly. While Cassidy was busy picking out paint colors, I leaned in. My family stole a retail location that generates maybe $30,000 a month in gross revenue. But they did not steal the production contracts. Those are in my name, and those contracts are worth $500,000 a year. Marcus sat up straight. But we can't bake without the oven. We don't need that oven, I said. I leased a commercial production kitchen in the industrial district 3 weeks ago. It has 4 rack ovens. It has a walk-in proofer the size of my apartment. It is ugly, it is industrial, and it is nowhere near Main Street. But it is ready to go online on Monday. I slid 2 envelopes across the table. These are your new employment contracts, I said. You will be working at the production facility. No customers, no front-of-house drama, just baking, and because we are doing volume now, I am raising your hourly rate by $4. Noelle opened the envelope. Her hands were shaking, but this time it was not from fear. You knew? She asked. You knew they would do this? I knew they would try to take what they could see, I said. My family is shallow. They only look at the surface. They saw a cute shop on a busy street and thought that was the empire. They didn't realize the shop was just the tip of the iceberg. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Graham. The cease and desist has been served. Your mother just called my office screaming. She says you are stealing their livelihood. I typed back a reply. I am not stealing their livelihood. I am just refusing to fund their hobby. I looked back at my team. My family is fighting over a corpse, I told them. They are fighting over a condemned building and a debt they cannot pay. Let them have the drama. Let Cassidy have the Instagram likes. We are going to take the market. Marcus grinned, a slow, wide smile. So we are ghost baking? Exactly, I said. We are ghosts, and ghosts don't pay rent to landlords who betray them. I stood up. I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I realized that the destruction of the bakery wasn't a loss. It was an amputation of a gangrenous limb. I had cut off the dead weight, my family. And now, finally, I could run. Go home, I told them. Rest. Monday morning. Report to the new address. We have 5,000 loaves to bake for the hotel contract. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the cold wind. I checked the live stream one last time. Cassidy was still online, arguing with a commenter about the definition of structural integrity. I put my phone in my pocket. I did not need to watch anymore. The real show was about to start, and it wouldn't be on a screen. It would be on a balance sheet. The conference room at the city municipal building smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a soulless, beige room where dreams went to die under the weight of triplicate forms. On one side of the long laminate table sat the Tribunal of Consequences. There was Inspector Miller from the Department of Building and Safety. There was Mr. Henderson, the landlord, looking like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. There was the representative from the bank holding the lien on my parents' house, and there was the legal counsel for Elite Soirees, the event company Cassidy had defrauded. On the other side sat my family. Cassidy was slumped in her chair, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. The girl boss, silk jumpsuit long gone. My mother was weeping into a tissue, a soft, rhythmic sound that used to make me rush to fix things. Today, it just sounded like background noise. My father stared at the table, his face gray and slack. I sat at the end of the table, next to Graham Pike. I was not on their side. I was not on the city's side. I was a witness. Let us review the tally, Inspector Miller said, adjusting his glasses. He did not sound angry. He sounded efficient. For the unpermitted removal of a load-bearing wall, the fine is $10,000. For the illegal modification of a commercial gas line in a multi-use building, the fine is $25,000. For the removal of mandatory ventilation equipment, $5,000. And for operating a business without a certificate of occupancy, $5,000. He looked up. The total immediate assessment from the city is $45,000. This must be paid within 30 days, or a lien will be placed on all assets owned by the guarantors. My father flinched as if he had been slapped. $45,000, he whispered. We don't have that cash. We spent the loan on the renovation. Then you have a problem. Mr. Henderson cut in. His voice was shaking with rage. Because under the terms of the lease, which is now void due to gross negligence, I am exercising my right to immediate eviction. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. And I am suing you for the cost of restoring the building to its original condition. My contractor estimates that will cost another $80,000. $80,000! My mother shrieked. She looked at me, her eyes desperate. Brinley, say something. You know this building. It cannot cost that much. I looked at her. Actually, Mom, that is a conservative estimate. Structural steelwork is expensive. You should know that. You signed the liability waiver. She tricked us! Cassidy shouted, slamming her hand on the table. It was a weak, pathetic gesture. She knew the wall was important. She let me knock it down so she could ruin me. Graham Pike cleared his throat. He did not even look up from his file. Ms. Diaz, we have already established that you posted a video stating, and I quote, I decide what is structural. We also have the time-stamped email where you accepted the $15,000 operating fund and spent it immediately on decor instead of a structural engineer. You were not tricked. You were funded. You simply allocated the funds to vanity instead of safety. The lawyer for the event company leaned forward. He was a shark in a pinstripe suit. And regarding the Bloomin' Bread Gala, he said smoothly, my client paid a $5,000 deposit to Cassidy and Bloom, based on the representation that the venue was a licensed champagne bar. Since that was a lie, we are suing for fraud. The contract your daughter signed, and your parents guaranteed, has a penalty clause for misrepresentation. That is another $20,000 in damages. I did the math in my head. $45,000 to the city, $80,000 to the landlord, $20,000 to the event planners, plus the $75,000 they owed the bank for the loan they had already wasted. $220,000. That was the price of their arrogance. That was the cost of thinking they could simply take what I had built because they felt entitled to it. My father put his head in his hands. We will lose the house, he groaned. We are going to lose everything. He looked at me then. It was the look I had waited my whole life to see. Not love, not pride, but terrified recognition. He finally saw me. He saw that I was not the safety net. I was the one who had removed it. Brinley, he begged, his voice cracking. Please, you have savings. You have the business accounts. You can fix this. We are your family. I cannot fix this, I said calmly, because I do not own Rye and Marigold anymore. The room went silent. What? Cassidy whispered. I transferred the assets, I said. Not the building. The building was a liability. I transferred the contracts, the recipes, the brand, the staff. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it toward Cassidy. This is the address of the new production facility, I said. It is in the industrial park. We started baking there at 4 o'clock this morning. Noelle is there. Marcus is there. We are fulfilling a contract for the Fairmont hotel chain that is worth $500,000 a year. Cassidy stared at the paper. Did you move the bakery? I moved the business, I corrected. You wanted the location. You wanted the cute brick walls and the Instagram spot. You got them, but you forgot that a bakery isn't a building. Cassidy, a bakery is the ability to bake, and you can't do that. You never could. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a sound of finality. The trademark Ryan Marigold is my sole property, I said to the room. I have already issued a public statement clarifying that the disaster on Main Street has no affiliation with my brand. My customers know where to find me. My wholesale partners have my new address. I looked at my parents. They looked small. They looked like strangers. I offered you a way out, I told them. I offered to keep running the business my way. You told me I was selfish. You told me I was holding Cassidy back. So I let go. I let you have exactly what you wanted. You wanted to be the owners? Congratulations. You own the debt. I turned to Graham. I am done here. Brinley! my mother screamed as I walked toward the door. "You cannot walk away. We are your parents." I paused with my hand on the metal handle. I looked back one last time. "I know," I said. "That is why I have to leave." I walked out of the municipal building and into the bright, cold sunlight. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car. It was my father calling, then my mother, then a text from Cassidy. "Cassidy, please, just help us this once. I will do anything. I am scared." I looked at the message. For 20 years. That text would have worked. For 20 years. Her fear was my command. I would have drained my savings. I would have apologized to the landlord. I would have fixed it. I looked at the block button. It was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. I pressed block. Then I did the same for my father. And my mother? The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I drove to the industrial park. The new facility was nothing like the old shop on Main Street. It was a concrete box with no windows and fluorescent lights. It smelled of diesel fumes from the delivery trucks outside. But when I opened the metal door, the air inside was warm. It smelled of yeast and caramelized sugar. "Boss is back," Marcus shouted from the ovens. He was pulling out a rack of perfectly golden loaves. Noelle looked up from the shaping table. She was smiling. "The hotel just called," she said. "They love the first batch. They want to double the order for next week." I walked over to the stainless steel bench. I put on my apron. I washed my hands. I plunged my hands into the warm, living dough. It felt heavy and real. It fought back just enough to let me know it was alive. I thought about my family sitting in that beige room, drowning in the ink of their own signatures. I thought about the years I spent trying to buy their love with my labor, trying to be useful enough to be kept around. I realized then that I had not lost a family. I had simply fired a group of bad employees who were embezzling my life. Some people only love you when you are useful. They love you like a tool, like a hammer or a key. And when you stop working the way they want, they try to break you, but they forgot that I was not the hammer. I was the fire that forged it. The dough yielded under my palms, transforming from a chaotic mass into a smooth, strong sphere. My sister smashed my dream bakery. She took a sledgehammer to my life and thought she had buried me in the rubble. So I became the landlord of my own destiny, and I evicted them from my heart. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on how I handled my family. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit subscribe and turn on notifications to help share this story with more people.